Hot Topics for August. It's on transportation. I'm Sue Gilman, one of the co-presidents of the Orange County League of Women Voters. And today's Hot Topics, which is being presented by both Orange and Seminole County Leagues, is titled Next Stop Prosperity, because transportation is a perennially hot topic here in Central Florida. It affects so much more than just how we get from point A to point B. It is also integral to the economy of our community. As you know, the Orange County League has been involved and outspoken on transportation issues, and we are really excited about today's program. At this time, I'm going to share my screen and ask everyone, as soon as I get the flag up, to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand by 1 second. There we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to welcome all of our attendees, our distinguished panel, our moderator, and any elected officials who are in attendance today. Also, a big thank you to everyone who is attending via Zoom. We have been talking about and begun working on how to bring Hot Topics back to a live format, but with COVID surging, we will remain in the virtual world for the time being. A few reminders about the Zoom. Let's go this way. All audience members are muted and your videos are off. This presentation is also streaming via Facebook Live, and it is being recorded. The video will be available on our YouTube channel within a few days. And please note that the questions in the chat will also be on the recording. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Geraldine Wright, the president of the Seminole County League, who is co-sponsoring today's presentation. Geraldine?
Hi, on behalf of the Seminole County League of Women Voters, we'd like to say thank you to the Orange League for inviting us to participate along with you in this hot topic today. We are sure that it will invoke lively discussion and we would be excited to hear from the experts in the field. Again, thank you for the invitation to participate in this hot topic today.
And thank you for being part of it, Geraldine, and your members. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Tim Giuliani. As the president and CEO of the Orlando Economic Partnership, Tim is working to advance the pace of change and alter the perception of Orlando, which has for so long been best known for tourism. Tim is leading a multi-year effort to create a new model for economic community development and that challenges the status quo and establish a path toward prosperity for all. Before joining the partnership, Tim was the president and CEO of the Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce in North Carolina, and he has also led the Gainesville area chamber here in Florida. Tim, welcome, and let's get started.
Great. Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Geraldine, for having me and for bringing this conversation to this audience and really getting into linking transportation and our future and prosperity, something we certainly spend a lot of time discussing. Before I introduce the panelists, just a little context I was asked to give as to, from the perspective of the Orlando Economic Partnership, when we think about transportation and we think about broad-based prosperity, how do they mesh? And there's really two salient points that I think it comes down to. One is, as we're trying to improve our region and diversify our economy, add jobs, add more employers that bring higher wages and more opportunity, we don't want, along with that growth, our world to get smaller. And what that means is harder to get around, more traffic, and as a result, less opportunity for the people that live here. The other thing I think is very important and keeps coming up is that this is about access. And if you're in Central Florida and you rely on transit, on an average 30-minute commute you have access to 5,000 jobs on average. If that same person has a car, they have access in that same 30-minute commute to over 500,000 jobs. So think about the world of that person and the opportunities that they have, how much more just having a car has in Central Florida. And while access needs to be a key tenet of future investments and decisions in transportation so that we can get more opportunity to more people. So it kind of works both ways. Employers want a larger labor pool, and people want more options of where to work. And so that's just a couple examples of how prosperity and transportation are linked and why we care so much about it and why we're advocating for bold investments in transportation in Central Florida. So this panel that we have today are in great seats to talk about what they're already doing and what they would like to see done when it comes to transportation. Our first panelist is Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings. Jerry Demings was sworn into office December 4th, 2018, to a somewhat raucous crowd as the 5th mayor of Orange County and the first African-American to serve in that role. I think it's important for this conversation. The mayor serves on several regional board of directors, including the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, the Central Florida Expressway Authority, Metro Plan Orlando, and Central Florida Regional Transportation Authority. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's DBA links. So Mayor spends a lot of his time involved in transportation discussing. So Mayor, we're glad to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim, for that wonderful introduction. Currently, I also serve as the chair of the Commuter Rail Commission, better known as SunRail, here within the area. And I look forward to a robust discussion today as we talk about the importance of regional transportation. Certainly, I have made that one of the cornerstones for my tenure as mayor here within Orange County. And as we move forward today, I'll share much more about my vision for the county, where we are, and what we believe are some of the solutions to the transportation challenges that we have.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Mayor. Our next panelist is John Slott. John is the Chief Innovation Officer of the Central Florida Regional Transportation Authority, LINKS, and it's a public agency in the state of Florida responsible for providing and coordinating transportation services within 3 counties, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole. And that area is over 2,400 square miles. So John, we're glad to have you and certainly interested in your perspective from a transit perspective.
Thank you, Tim.
Our final panelist today is Michael Segalis. So Michael serves as Executive Vice President of Infrastructure Development at Brightline, and that is since 2017. He's been responsible for overseeing the infrastructure development of Brightline's Phase 2 project, which we know is the route from West Palm to Orlando since 2017. He's also overseeing engineering and planning for the new stations in Aventura and Boca Raton, and the extension of the rail line to Tampa. So Michael comes to us, he has a long history of managing major civil engineering projects all over the world, and we're fortunate to have him adding capacity and access and opportunity here in Central Florida. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for organizing this very important summit to talk about our transportation needs.
Absolutely. Let's jump in, and Mayor, I'll start with you. This question will be for all 3 of you, just to hear a little bit about how your organization, Mayor, I think in your perspective, you have a number of hats that you wear, but as Orange County Mayor in particular, how are you working to make transit better for Central Floridians? And what's the most important positive change that could be implemented within the next 10 years?
Thank you for the question, Tim. We have a number of initiatives underway. As many of you know, back in 2020, I intended to advance to the ballot a transportation infrastructure sales tax initiative that we believe likely would have passed based upon a survey that was done by Clearview Research as many as 72% of our residents supported a sales tax that would address the transportation challenges that we have. Orange County also did its own surveys, and I participated in some 200 plus community meetings talking about the viability of a transportation surtax. Had the tax passed, it would have produced approximately $600 million on an annual basis. If we had annualized that figure for a 20-year or 30-year period of time, you could see that it would have produced 18 to $20 billion perhaps over time. That would have allowed us to do something that would have been transformational for our community. We had chosen to share a portion of the proceeds with the municipalities within the area, where we could have also addressed some local infrastructure needs, such as bike pathways and trails and other things to improve the free flow of transit within our community. Of course, due to the pandemic, I suspended that effort. I am likely going to bring back that opportunity again in 2022. That's the first time that we can put it back on the ballot. That is going to be contingent upon where we are economically here within this community. I believe that up until this recent surge that we now see as we are dealing with the pandemic, we were well on our way to economic recovery. Our tourist development tax receipts were up and things were really looking good. So now we have to kind of contain this virus and refocus ourselves in order that we do not adversely impact our economy for the foreseeable future. The second thing that we're doing here within Orange County, we've taken a look at our land use plans. Our comprehensive plans need some revision to incentivize developers developing workforce housing closer to where people will work. We believe that if, as a region, if we are well connected, if the cost of transit is affordable, and also if the cost of transit is convenient to our residents, they will likely take a multimodal system of transit here within our community. We have to kind of improve upon that. When we look at Sunrail, I believe that Sunrail has an opportunity to expand. We have a wonderful spine with Sunrail today, but in order for that to adequately provide services to the entire county and region, we have to have spines or fingers that go out into the different geographic areas of our community. We want to better plan our communities where workforce housing is located closer to where people work. And we have a number of initiatives underway. We had a Housing for All task force. We created a housing trust fund that will allow us to partner with the private sector and other public sector projects to build this workforce housing closer to our transit corridors, and thereby reducing the overall cost of transit to the riders and to those who need to get to work on a day-to-day basis. So I'll talk more about all of that as we continue the dialogue today.
Thank you, Mayor. Same question, John, to you. Please, help us understand what your organization's doing to make transit better for Central Floridians and the most positive change that could be implemented in the next 10 years.
Thank you, Tim. And as you had set up in our initial introduction, links, we serve 3 counties, Osceola, Seminole, and of course Orange County. So Mayor Demings, under his leadership, drives our system and how we deliver to our community. So we are supremely focused on our core mission, and our core mission is to move people of our community safely, reliably, and with an eye to fiduciary responsibility. So that's our mission. That's what we're focused on every day. And if we can do that well, then people will wish to expand it potentially. And if not, we just continue to move on that core mission. The second piece of it is, as the mayor has just stated, is something we hear from our community and heard in the mayor's public hearings around the tax referendum was really more frequent service and span of service. So as most individuals who've lived in other cities experience with mass transit, if the bus is coming every 10 minutes, you don't worry about planning. You just know the next bus will be there in 10 minutes. Same thing with the train, same thing with last mile, first mile solutions like microtransit. You have a reliability and a safety that's already built in. In our current system, what we currently have developed, our headways are 60 to 30 minutes. You miss the first bus, you have an hour to wait for the next bus. So as we look at our community growing and expanding and supporting the transportation system of the future, it would be wonderful to allow for that more frequent and more seamless transit modes and services in the coming 10 years.
Okay. Thanks, John. Mike, same question to you and Brightline's perspective.
Sure. I think it's important to note right off the bat that we, as residents here in Central Florida, live in the 10th largest mega region in the Western Hemisphere, which is pretty stunning. And that region, that mega region, extends from Miami through West Palm Beach to Orlando and over to Tampa. It's the 10th largest mega region in the world. So there's a past, present, and future to what we are doing. In the past, we have developed and opened the system from Miami to West Palm Beach. And that system was up and running and was shut down for COVID, but will be reopening in early November. And at present, we are connecting the South Florida region with Orlando. That system is under construction. And in the future, we hope to connect the Tampa region with the Orlando area. So that would create an intercity spine. And you heard Mayor Demings talk about the different modalities. We look at this as one modality, and that being the intercity modality, the one that connects the urban regions. And we desperately need local connections and local modalities to connect with to make this a functional system of transportation. So we eagerly want to participate in that discussion.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Mayor, back to you. So as you think about, wanting to improve transit here in the region, what do you think's the biggest barrier to improvement, and what can we collectively do about it?
Well, we are all going to be unanimous on this point, the lack of funding. In order for us to do something transformative, we are going to have to rely upon public-private partnerships in order to make that a reality. I have to say that when we have a private investor like Brightline that's willing to invest in our community, that is a step in the right direction. However, Brightline will not be able to address all of the challenges that we have as a region. The public sector is going to have to put some dollars into this process, and I can tell you that when we look at the various funding sources, when we look at the gas tax, for example, that is a relatively flat tax here within Orange County, if not declining, for many reasons. Number one, the vehicles are becoming much more fuel efficient on the roadways, requiring less petroleum gas in order to operate. We now have the advent of more electric vehicles as well. And so we have to look at our entire funding projections. But even with all of that, in order to address the multi-billion-dollar need to develop this robust system that is well connected and a true regional type of a system, it will require billions of dollars in order to be able to get there. I can tell you that when we look at the ad valorem taxes here within Orange County during 2021, the property appraiser estimates that real estate market values rose in Orange County by 1.2% over 2020 values to nearly $25 billion. that is the smallest one-year percentage increase in at least the last 9 years. So when we look at all of the demands for the county funds, transportation is but one of those demands, and we don't have sufficient funding to be able to address that. When we look within our tourism corridor, we took a major hit on our tourist development tax receipts as a result of the pandemic. We went from a high of some months of having $30 million of revenues brought in to a low in April of 2020 of just over $700,000. In June of this year, we saw our tourist development tax receipts go back up to $21.7 million. That's the highest it's been. It's at 2017 levels, but not yet back to 2019 levels. So from a funding perspective, we need a new model of funding here, which is why I believe that the 1 penny, 1% sales tax was the answer to be able to assist us with developing a true multimodal system that could be innovative, that could have various components, include commuter rail, light rail, perhaps bus rapid transit, that could improve the traffic engineering system here within our area, that could also improve other infrastructure, create bike pathways and other things that would assist us in this process. And then lastly, I alluded to this earlier about just how we plan our communities. We have to do a better job of planning where housing is located and ensure that we do create these incentives for developers to develop in areas where there are transit corridors. One that comes to mind recently is a partnership that we have with Universal Studios of Orlando, in which Universal has provided 7 acres of land to near the International Drive corridor out near the convention center that will work with Wendover developers to create a workforce housing complex of about 1,000 units there that will be income-based, but we're incentivizing that development because we believe that that will allow workers to live close to where they're going to work, and we have to have those types of innovations. We're looking at where we have surplus county lands to put those lands together into a patchwork that could be made available to developers to, again, lower the cost of the real estate that will bring the overall cost of a development project down to make it more affordable. So we have multiple prongs that we're looking at so that we can make sure that we have a cost effective a product that is available to everyone, where we have equity within our community, where low wage earners are able to reduce their cost of transportation and transit, and even the hours of transit. Unfortunately, I have to say that many of our service workers spend too many hours each day in transit getting to work, and we want to reduce that time for transit so that they can recapture hours in each day to improve their quality of life, and they'll have more time to spend with families, the family members and their children. So all of that really, I think, speaks to the overall character of our community as we endeavor to move forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. John, let me ask you also, identify biggest barrier to transit in our region and what we can do about it.
I think to support the mayor's call, he stated it very eloquently. It is basically funding. So I think we at Links stand at the ready to implement an appropriate transportation system, mass transit system, in keeping with what our residents and the mayor's direction are. I think the barriers that we see, so working with the Wendover team on the Housing for Today, the Wendover Housing for Today program is a great example of how the public and the private sectors work together to plan how will a multimodal hub work, and then how will that multimodal hub support both the residents and workforce here, as well as transport our tourists through the corridor. So I think that's a great example of how public and private come together and build a multimodal system, with leadership, of course, from the county and Wendover. I think one of the barriers coming in the future from a sustainability perspective is, and Mayor just mentioned electric vehicles, zero emission vehicles. We need to break the code on electricity as fuel. So the context right now, as we buy electricity based on usage, not based on mileage, not based on consumption. So changing the business model for how we consume electricity as a fuel source. We can't afford to keep building every gas pump we need as transit agencies. That's infrastructure that could probably possibly be built better by a public-private partnership. And the outcome for the public agency is we'll be there every day to fuel. And then we can focus on the vehicle side of the equation, making sure that we have zero emission vehicle options for our community that also helps with sustainability and long-term use of transit. So I think for us specifically on the sustainability side, it would be electricity as fuel. And of course, the funding points that the mayor has articulated.
Thanks for adding an extra dimension to that, John. Mike, when you think about barriers in Central Florida, what comes to mind?
Well, of course, it's not hard to agree with the mayor and with John that funding is a key aspect of that. But I think there's an organizational issue that we need to address. Mayor Demings is taking a leadership position on this, and that's fantastic. That's what we need, and also Mayor Dyer is heavily involved with that. But we need more than that. We need a community, a broad swath of the community that is meeting regularly and is reviewing the needs. Metro Plan is a part of this and is getting into the details of this modality question. What are the correct modalities? What Lynx is doing is an important piece of this. What we're doing to connect the cities is an important piece of this. We have Sunrail that has a north-south spine, and we have discussions underway for a Sunrail connection to the airport. That will be very important, but we still haven't penetrated to broad swaths of the community. So how do we connect the 436 corridor? When is BRT the right solution? When is LRT the right solution? And how do these systems look? What kinds of federal monies might be available to support this? And how do we as a community get out in front of that need? Because to apply for these federal funds, we need as a community to be organized and to have identified and prioritized and agreed upon our needs locally such that we're prepared to apply when funding is available, to mobilize our community to provide local funding, like Mayor Demings has discussed with the penny sales tax, and also to be able to give clear direction to our political leaders in Washington, so that our priorities are clear and they have a clear view of what we as a community want. So it's to us, organization is important as well. I think we need to form a community-wide coalition and hammer out the tough conversations that have to take place about how we are going to connect between the airport and I-Drive. But not only that, but how we are going to connect Altamont Springs and how we are going to connect the 436 corridor and where the people in our community live and where they work. How are we going to broadly connect those areas? I think it's organization.
I'll keep this next question to you first. You brought up different modalities, and we've obviously over the last several years had Uber and Lyft and kind of more advancement with autonomous vehicles. How do you see those options playing in with some of the, more traditional buses and trains and highways conversation?
Definitely, they're part of the solution, Tim. We do have more options available to us now than we did before. Uber and Lyft are widely accepted as a viable means of getting to your end destination and a convenient means. But also the micro systems of bicycles and scooters that are available. It's amazing how many people you see that are actually riding the train to Miami Station and getting on a scooter and taking their last mile that way. So all of those things are part of it, but it's that sort of middle part, that piece that before you get to a bus. How are you making the last 5 miles down to it's really that last 5 miles. That last mile, there are many options for. I think we need more options than just Uber and Lyft.
Okay. John, as you think about the bus service, improving bus service, how do you think about the increase in Uber, Lyft, and autonomous vehicle technologies?
I think, as Mike stated, we're a sort of cog in a bigger wheel here from a transportation network, and these represent new modes. So the idea that one of our tenets is critical is just meet passengers where they are. So we need to be able to provide passengers options, because we're not talking about mass transit versus intercity versus TNCs anymore. That conversation has passed. What we're really talking about is how people make a choice between driving their own personal car and using some form of mass transit shared system. So I think, to Mike's point, that integrated seamless system is based on frequency and reliability, as well as options. So, you can see a future where someone takes a scooter from their house to the local bus stop, takes the bus to close to their work, and then takes a TNC from the train station or the bus station to their final destination on their work campus, right?
Yep.
That type of seamless integration, right now, that requires 6 different systems, 4 different fare medias, 5 different applications on your phone, versus hop in your car and drive 30 minutes. So as we move to that potential future, it's breaking down those barriers and making it almost to the point where you do not have to plan the option. So I would say, the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, they're the current generation. The autonomous world is going to just add another facet to the experience in the vehicle. And the critical parts there, of course, safety. From a transit perspective, we're watching very closely as the autonomous technologies continue to be enhanced. How will they scale into larger vehicles? So right now, 9-person shuttles running under 15 miles an hour, in closed circuit, not mixed traffic. How can we get to a point where we're talking about larger vehicles, the 40-person capacity, so on? The second piece of that is critical safety. The last piece is our operators, the folks that are driving the vehicles today, do more than just drive the vehicle. There's all sorts of things in the autonomous world around making sure that passengers are treated fairly without barriers. So folks that have physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities that utilize these systems should not experience a barrier. So how does an operator's role shift from driving the vehicle to being an ambassador on the vehicle to help folks that may have those limitations, as well as just guide the experience in a mass transit world. That's to be determined. But we're watching all those technologies and those capabilities. But I think final point would be these types of plans are established by the federal government as well as our community partners. We have 10-year plans that identify some of the routes that Mike referenced and how will we serve it and what will the stages of that service be. And the question will be is, as we get to the funding discussions, which level of service and what types of layers of service we can afford as a community to enable.
Okay. Mayor, I'm going to pull together these questions in addition to referencing the League's 2018 Transportation Report Card, studied the need for a regional transportation vision. And we've just heard seamless experience. We've heard these different modalities. Just reading your bio, you have to go to 5 different meetings to have 5 different conversations about different modes of transportation. And I'm just curious, going through that experience and attending all of those meetings, how do you see a more seamless transportation network going forward?
Excellent question. First off, I do believe that at some point we'll have to have the conversation about the consolidation of some of our authorities. I believe that at an appropriate time, once the commuter rail system, SunRail, is turned over to local control and operations, we likely will need to have a conversation about whether or not that's an appropriate time to consider things like consolidating that entity with links. And that is something that is in the future that will come up for consideration, because we may be able to realize some efficiencies there by consolidating our, I'm going to say, our public bus system with our commuter rail system. In many communities, especially large metropolitan communities around the country, you'll see that type of structure that is set up. But I also believe that in order to ensure that we have seamless types of operations, we have to consider community engagement to make certain that whatever we build, it is what the people here within the region truly want to see and what they want to participate in. And one of the ways that we can ensure that is the various public bodies that now have decision-making authority, such as Metroplan, such as the commuter rail system, SunRail, such as Links, and perhaps even the Central Florida Expressway Authority and others here locally. I believe that we have to ensure that where there are opportunities for advisory board participation, that the makeup of those advisory boards are reflective truly of every demographic within our respective communities. We have to make certain that when we plan out these systems, that they contemplate access to the disabled, and that we have to have an abundance of community meetings to ensure that we're getting the type of input that we need. I believe that when we have conversations like the one today that is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters, that this is a positive step to get community engagement. I said earlier that we had some 200 community meetings where I participated in and took the show on the road to talk about the pros and the cons of a potential sales tax increase. And when we did that, the League of Women Voters participated almost in many of them. I would say maybe not all 200, but many of those meetings, they were present. But we were doing that to get community input from riders. We did various surveys of our community to ensure that the multimodal system that we were envisioning was something that was going to be consistent with the desires of our community. Recently, I was provided some survey results. It was a SunRail rider survey that was done back in March of this year. And at that time, it showed that leisure ridership was 50.9% for Sunrail, which exceeded the commuter, the workers who were riding at 38.9%. And I think some of that is the commuter ridership had declined somewhat, I think, because many of our businesses had their workforce teleworking. They were not coming into the downtown corridor and some other things where people were making adjustment through the use of technology. And so all of that, I think, in terms of trying to ensure that our system is seamless, we have to look at the organizational structure of the entities that I enumerated earlier. We have to get better broad input from those who will be utilizing the system, those who are riding, those who are driving, and then we have to look at, I think, the different options and the frequency, the connectivity, and all those things that we talked about earlier as well amongst the group here today.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'm transitioning us to some of the questions that have been typed into the chat feature in the webinar, and a number of them talk about funding sources. And Mayor, I know you did a lot of work at the very beginning of your term, knowing transportation was a priority, around what are the available funding sources and where could this investment come from. So different questions, kind of use of tourism development tax, a multi-county 1 cent sales tax. Talk a little bit about, I think what they're asking is where are the sources of funding and what's on the table and what should be considered?
Well, in terms of the tourist development tax, under the current Florida law, it has certain restrictions on how those funds can be used. And typically, of course, we're talking about the 6% tax on heads and beds when people stay in our hotels. But we have used that to do a multitude of things in our community, and not just to improve the tourist corridor, but we have used it to support our venues, the building of the Performing Arts Center. We have used it to expand Camping World Stadium. We have used it to build our convention center and then to maintain our convention center. We have used it to support the arts within our community. And one of the things that the elected controller here in Orange County, Phil Diamond, said 2 days ago when he gave the most recent numbers for the tourist tax receipts for June of this year. There was the second consecutive month where we did not go in the deficit, where we were able to put money into our reserves. And from the point where we started the decline with our local economy during last year in March, April of 2020, due to the pandemic, in order to build back up the healthy reserves that we had, one of the things that Phil Diamond said was that it would take us 96 months of bringing in at least a net of $1 million to build the reserves back up to where they were pre-pandemic. 96 months, of course, that's 8 years to get back to the healthy reserves where we were. And even at that point, we're talking about reserves that were unrestricted. We have some debt that we still have to pay for with the tourist development tax receipts. So if you take out the debt and to get back up to the $200 million range of reserves that are unrestricted, it would take us 8 years. And so even with that, not sufficient to be able to address the multi-billion-dollar needs that we currently have. The gas tax, at last estimate, I believe we bring in about $27 million a year in Orange County for the gas tax. And it has been, again, relatively flat because of the reasons I explained earlier. And that's if we went up to the max that we could tax here on gas receipts, again, I think that is a declining revenue source because of the innovation that we're seeing with electric vehicles and otherwise. Some communities have decided to tax even electric vehicles who drive on the roadways but aren't filling up at the gas pump. I believe here in the U.S., about 28 states have passed legislation that now taxes the use of electric vehicles. Florida is not one of them at this point, but the Florida legislature is considering that. But even with any type of tax receipt that could come in from that, I don't believe it will be sufficient to do something transformative. As a growing region, our growth right now, there are numerous articles today in various news and journal magazines, et cetera, that's saying that our growth in Florida and Central Florida is slowing down. But that just may be temporary. But suffice it to say, we're still in this high growth environment, and our roads at this point, we have many failed roads that are overburdened, where there's traffic congestion. To address the need for infrastructure improvements with our roads, we're looking to leverage our local dollars with any federal dollars that potentially can be used. As you know, the Biden administration has plans for infrastructure improvements, but I believe that those are going to be competitive types of processes that where they will look for synergy to match what is being done at the local level. And so we want to be in a position where we are able to compete for any federal or state dollars that could help address the true needs of a mass transit system here within our entire region. So a long way to answer your question, but as I see it, those are the challenges that we have when, I even touched earlier about the ad valorem taxes, our real estate values in 2021, 1.2%. For Orange County, that's the lowest it's been in 9 years. So all of those sources, when we have additional demands for social services, for public safety, and all those other things that as a county we have to address, it really means that we have a lot of pressure here to manage the true economic needs of our community. So we have to look to diversify, bring in higher wage jobs, and that means investing in our technology here within our community, ensuring that we have the talent pool that is here, and our higher education facilities, our universities will play a significant role in that. As we look to build broad-based prosperity within this community, I believe that, again, if we look to the sales tax as probably the best fit for us, it will create entrepreneurial opportunities. It will create a lot of additional revenue from the professional services right down to, I think, the services such as landscapers and construction, et cetera, within our community that could provide a significant economic opportunity for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, key question that's come up in the chat. When can we expect to take a train to Miami from Orlando? And then perhaps looking a little bit in your crystal ball, when might that same train trip be available from Orlando to Tampa?
Okay. Miami to Orlando will be opening in mid-23. You'll be able to buy a ticket and take a train in mid-23. We're still on track to complete construction by the end of 22. And following that, we have to go through a pretty rigorous safety certification process with the Federal Railroad Administration. So mid-23 for that, which is feels to me like it's right around the corner. It might still feel like it's a long way away for some people, but for me, with all we have to get done, it's right around the corner. Tampa, as you know, we're in the NEPA process for Tampa. That NEPA process is anywhere from 12 to 18 months long. And following the NEPA process, we need to complete the design. That's probably another year after that. And then we have a construction period, which is about 3 years. So at best, we're looking at, 5.5 to 6 years, could be longer depending on the challenges that we face in the NEPA process to get to Tampa.
Thank you. Maybe as a last question to the three panelists, we appreciate your time. The three of you obviously spend a lot of time on these topics, and we have a group here online, and then people that will be watching this later. And I'd be interested in what you want people to know that are engaged in this process or leaders in our community. What should they know about the needs for transportation to help drive prosperity across our community, to provide more access? What is it that really needs to be understood about this kind of difficult challenge that we face? On the other hand, I think, like Mayor has outlined, a huge opportunity to transform our community. What is the closing comment? I'll start, John, with you.
Thanks, Tim. I think in closing, I would invite everyone to take the bus. So we've done a lot of this conversation. I think what you'll see is you'll see a couple of things. First off, we have a really interesting community. You'll see 10 random acts of kindness between different people helping each other in a bus ride. You'll see individuals that are using that bus for a critical trip to get to work, to get their kids to some play or some entertainment. You'll see those things. Imagine that if it didn't take 2.5 hours, right? So what can our community do to actually help our community live, work, play a better life and be more connected without barrier? And I think that's what it represents. And then to the conversations here is we have some wonderful leadership in this community that's saying we want to do it. We don't want to just do that. We want to do it in a sustainable manner. We want to do it with innovation. Heck, we want to have fun doing it. So these systems are hard. They're difficult. As you can see, it's complex and it's messy. But having leaders that are dedicated to this vision long term, because that's what it's going to take to build the infrastructure, and do that with the public and the private partnership, it is the way that our community will be successful. And we have all these beautiful things about the community being our tourist population driving certain behaviors, 75 million people showing up on our shores every year, to our beautiful lakes and natural resources and bike paths and so on. So the things that we enjoy as residents. So how do we build that new future with that innovation, with that sustainability? And so I would say, I'd invite you to take the bus and then please be engaged. I thank you very much to the League of Women Voters, because you are engaged. So I appreciate your vision and your pressure to help us change and keep going. It'll be a fun ride. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good advice. Mike, what would you like them to know?
That we're reaching the end of the period where roads and road expansion can be the answer to our transportation needs. We have to think about the next chapter. We need additional modalities, and it is going to be a sea change for all of us. But it actually is a pretty picture. It's a great way to be able to move around our state. It's going to be a great day when you can leave your house and get to a point of public transportation that takes you to a point where you can connect to another city. And on the other end, you can do it as well. It's a more sustainable way of living. It will enable us to protect the remaining wild lands that we have, which are critical to our future. So it's the road phase is ending, a new phase is beginning, and it's a pretty picture.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we didn't even get into vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, so there's even more to cover. Mayor, closing comments on what you hope this engaged group of citizens should know.
I think we have a tremendous opportunity to build a mass transit system here within our region that is environmentally sensitive. we can no longer not address this, because if we want to protect our lakes, if we want to protect our air quality, if we want to protect our environmentally sensitive lands, part of the solution, or the solution, I think, has to be addressing this by developing a true mass transit system. We can no longer really just encourage the individuals to move throughout our community in single vehicles with 1 or 2 occupants. We have to look at a true multimodal system that kind of looks at innovation, that will allow us to move around freely but efficiently. And so I believe that the technology is here now. There's still a lot of research being done with autonomous vehicles, but even I say with autonomous vehicles, they should contemplate moving a large number of people around efficiently within our community. And so I am committed to doing that. Orange County is currently working on its Vision 2050 plan. We're going to continue to plan, but we have to do more than just plan. We have to execute. I look forward to working with our state legislators as well as our federal legislators to ensure that we work in partnership with the private sector to come up with solutions. If we all put some skin in this game, then we can come up with the type of system that we all truly need and desire. And so I look forward to that in the very near future.
Well, thank you to the 3 of you for taking the time to join us. And Sue, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. To the panel, thank you so much for an excellent, stimulating, thoughtful, and frankly, just it's an exciting discussion. I really, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who learned something today. And while there's still much work to be done, it's clear that there's also a lot to be excited about. Thank you for guiding the conversation, Tim. You did a terrific job of sort of keeping the conversation moving in a positive direction. And before everyone signs off, I want to be respectful of your time. I just want to remind you, in September, our Hot Topics will be discussing housing issues in Central Florida. The problems, as we know, are many, including evictions, affordability, and even local wages enter into it. Our panel will discuss a variety of issues, some that we know about and perhaps some that we don't know. So please join us on September 8th, same time, same place. And you can, of course, sign up to participate on our website, lwvoc.org. Thanks, everyone, for attending. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for your leadership, League of Women Voters. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
Mayor.
everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone.